Labor MP Alicia Payne wants to decriminalise hard drugs in the ACT. Drugs like ice, heroin, speed, coke and ecstasy. Under a bill she supports, people would be able to carry up to 20 doses of ice and up to 8 doses of heroin. No small amount. Home Affairs Minister Karen Andrews has torched the idea. She says Labor can't be trusted to keep the community safe and has given her word that the Morrison government would never support such legislation. Addiction is a disease that tears apart not just those in its grips, but their families, their friends and pretty much everyone in their orbit. On an issue like this one, I wanted to talk to someone who has seen it, lived it, and now works in the guts of the sector that is dedicated to helping addicts turn their lives around. It's my pleasure to introduce you tonight Tina Gunter from the Fresh Start Recovery Program, a Perth-based rehab initiative that has helped more than 14,000 people and their families out of the vicious cycle of drug and alcohol addiction. Tina, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Can I perhaps start by asking you to share some of your story with our viewers so that people can have some context around your expertise in this space and your ability to talk with such authority on these matters?
Thank you so much, Gemma, and thank you for having me on the show. So I am currently a General Manager of a men's drug and alcohol recovery program. I got into the field 18 years ago when I was 25. You're going to know how old I am now, but I was 25 and looked around at my life, and I was homeless and I was broken and broke. I had lost everything as a result of heroin and methamphetamine addiction. So yes, I've been working my backside off for 18 years so that no other family will experience the pain that my family went through.
So you've seen this and you see this daily up close. One of the things that Alicia Payne says is that decriminalising this level of possession for this amount of these hard drugs will actually make it easy for people to get help. What do you say to that?
Well, I think that statement's absolutely ludicrous. And, to say that, to suggest 20 doses of methamphetamine, a person carrying 20 doses of methamphetamine is appropriate. It's very subjective. Like in my heyday, I was using 3.5 grams of methamphetamine a day on some days. So, so 10 doses, can you imagine? That's a lot of meth. 20 doses. So, this kind of legislation is fraught with danger, and we have to be very, very careful in how we in bringing this to the light.
Well, in your experience, in the experience of your work with Fresh Start and your colleagues, what are the main barriers to people getting help? Because the whole premise of this legislation seems to be, no, just take the stigma away from the criminal aspect of it, and people will just flock to get help. But I know from my previous life as a journalist with the network, that's certainly not what I saw in the courts, and I'm just curious to know if that's what you see in your day-to-day work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely let's make it what it is, and that is a health issue. And I know people won't agree with me in that. However, we need to open up conversations and make it easier for people to go and get help. And rather than decriminalising it, making sure that people have got support to get the help they need. Let's open up the conversation about how much these drugs are damaging Australians, but, that it's not just meth and heroin that are causing damage. A lot of the damage is already being caused by legal drugs such as alcohol. In Australia last year, there was 70,000 hospital admissions, and only 1,200 of those, I better get my facts straight here, only 10% of those were in WA. And of those 7,000 in West Australia in 2021, only 1,200 were caused by illicit substances. So let's go back to the real problem here, which is, according to stats, it's actually legal substances like alcohol that are causing significant damage. So they're already legal. So let's
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's been a conversation as long as I've been around this issue and an observer and a previous participant in the conversation. There's always been that thread of, one drug being a gateway to another. For example, alcohol might lead to then something harder, which then leads to something harder. I don't know what the stats are around that. Perhaps you can enlighten us whether that's simply something that you see or whether it's specific to people's personal circumstances. Because there's no such thing as a cookie-cutter addiction story, I don't think.
No, and that's one of the things we try to do in our program is it's an individual-based program. So we are client-led, client-focused, but also trauma-informed and evidence-based. So I think that the biggest gateway to drug addiction is trauma and lack of communication. So let's start talking about those things. Let's start talking about how we can teach people how to communicate their feelings, thoughts and emotions in a real way so that they feel confident enough to say when they're struggling or when they've experienced significant trauma in their life. And that's generally how people start using drugs.
So what you're saying, one of the things you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that the problem, the drug is a symptom of the underlying problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No one went, when I was 6 years old and they asked me what I want to do when I grow up, I didn't say I wanted to be a drug addict. That was the furthest thing from my mind, obviously, but I didn't wish that on my life. It was a natural, I know plenty of people that have got similar traumas or significant traumas in their life and they became alcoholics. And they I know people that got multiple degrees as a way to process those negative thoughts, feelings and emotions. So, drugs is just one aspect of a bigger problem. So, and mental health is a problem that's significant in Australia, and legalising substances like methamphetamine is only going to exacerbate that problem.